wrote a book that was entirely setting with no plot. Why did I do that? How did I do that? I don't know, just call me Walden. It's almost like I can see the crumbs of the story, but I can't like mush them all back together to make a cookie. Hello, in this video, I'm hoping to make more progress on my daily goals. I already walked 2 miles on the treadmill, one of my daily goals done, and then my other goal is to be working on my young adult fantasy that I call my magical mystery. At the end of the last video, I realized that by starting to craft the push-pull relationship that I envision between the main character and the primary antagonist, I will then further develop both characters so they stop feeling so unreachable and flat to me, and then I will also be able to imbue the prose with the main character's voice. Because part of the problem I've been having is that the prose feels so bad, like on a line level, that it really just discourages me from writing the story. And I think a big part of that is because none of the prose is infused at all with the main character's voice, because I don't have access to that voice right now. And I think the way to develop that will be by attempting to craft this push-pull relationship with her and the main antagonist. At least trying. I don't have any of those scenes to even edit, because in the first draft of this story, I'm halfway through draft 2, and in the first draft, I barely had those characters interact at all. I never even attempted to put in this push-pull relationship because I was so scared that my skills just aren't up to par with writing it, so I just didn't try. And I still feel like my skills aren't up to par in order to actually achieve what I envision this story to be, but the only way I'll even attempt to get there is by attempting to at least, begin crafting these scenes. So I'm going to take it a scene at a time, and I'm going to start by going to the point in the story where their first initial scene is, as my starting place here, trying to see how I feel like they're going to interact. And while I was on the treadmill, I thought up 2 ways the main character's backstory could be created to influence why she is even getting involved in this push-pull relationship with the primary antagonist. 2 different potential backstories that I could put into the story. And the only way I'm going to know which one I want to pursue and also potentially feels right for the story is by just seeing what feels right while I'm crafting their scenes. And I'm going to try not to think of it as scenes, this whole relationship at once. I'm going to try to take it scene by scene and not get overwhelmed. That is the goal, but I'm not sure how well it's going to go. But that's what we're going to be trying to do. Okay, I just wanted to pop in here real quick to say that I do start this video having every intention of having the next process in this draft be my creation and development of the push-pull relationship between the main character and the primary antagonist. I then, as soon as I start trying to do that, quickly realize that it would be more beneficial for this draft to have a complete outline of my story. So, even though a few videos ago I tried and absolutely, utterly, completely failed to create an outline for this story, in this video I do actually start and finish a complete outline for this story. So it's very satisfying. Please stay tuned. So what I'm going to do is go to the story document, to the place in the story where I think their first interaction is, see what the scene is currently doing, because right now I know what scene it is that they're supposed to have their first interaction, and I'm pretty sure that when I wrote that scene in draft 1 and pulled it over into the draft 2 document, they don't interact at all. They're both present in the scene, but there's no interaction, because I was literally afraid to write the interaction, and I literally never wrote them interacting. And because of that, both of them feel flat. So I'm hoping that by starting to develop this push-pull relationship, I will develop both characters. I will figure out how their actions push up against the plot, and potentially solve all my problems. Because right now, what I had realized was this entire story is literally just the arc of the setting. That was literally the entire story. The characters don't bump up against the plot at all. They don't really bump up against each other, and they aren't causing a plot. They're just observing the arc of the setting. So, good to be aware of, and I'm hoping the first step to actually creating a coherent story will be developing this push-pull relationship, and then in the future I can figure out how this push-pull relationship will naturally bump up against the plot, and hopefully the combination, or bump up against the setting, and hopefully the combination of those 2 things will craft the 3rd act, which currently doesn't exist, because in draft 1 the 3rd act was 100% filler. None of it was any good at all. It was literally just word vomit on the page in order for me to be able to see words, but it wasn't even related to anything. I mean, it was truly filler. So that will be in the distant future. Right now, trying to stay in the moment and just focus on this one scene, seeing how I feel, even just thinking about, looking at, participating in, trying to write or even craft ideas for this initial scene of this push-pull relationship. That is the goal. I'm gonna need so much luck. Please wish me luck. My cat is sticking his hand underneath the door and trying to paw at my bottom. But he doesn't like to be in here while I film. So it has now been 3 days since I talked to you. I just spent the weekend at my grandma's house for our Christmas with that side of the family. Even though it's mid-January, you know, the holidays are a busy time and things are hard to get all scheduled. So that means on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I did not walk 2 miles and I did not write or spend any time with my manuscript or in the writing headspace. But after I talked to you last time, I don't know why I just poked myself in the face. I did end up going back into my document because I wanted to read through the scene of the first interaction between the main character and the primary antagonist just to see how I can envision, you know, starting to form an interaction between the two. So I went back through that day and I read the scene and I thought, they don't need to interact. Which is, you know, objectively not true. That can't be true. So, that wasn't great because I didn't come away from that scene feeling like I had any ideas for how to start implementing this push-pull relationship, but instead I feel like they don't need to interact in that first scene, and there you go. Then I kind of gave up, but last night when I got back from my grandma's house, I actually did continue kind of like not reading, but like, what's the word when you're not reading? Grazing? What is that word? You know, your eyes are just kind of falling over the page, but you're not quite reading. Well, for some reason, I cannot think of whatever that word is, but I was doing that and trying to get to the scene, the next scene where they interact, or like a place where I felt like a next interaction could be. And I'm not sure there are any other scenes of my main character and my primary antagonist interacting at all in this second draft. There's literally one scene of them together, and they don't even interact in that scene. So that was interesting, because I had started thinking my next step was going to be trying to craft the initial interaction between those two, but last night when I was kind of grazing through the document, why can't I think of what that word is? I have no idea what word I'm trying to say here. But I started thinking maybe my next step actually needs to be outlining the story so that I can see a bird's eye view of what I currently have on the page and like try to like start playing with the sequence of events or like weaving in this new thread of a push-pull relationship in an outline rather than in the story, because it might be easier to work from a bird's eye view. So far today, I actually have started doing that. I have not yet walked my 2 miles. I still want to. I'm feeling resistance now that it's been 3 days since I've done it, and I like suddenly don't want to do it at all anymore, but I know it would be good for me to do it. I haven't done that yet, but what I have done is I went through my draft 2 and I just made a list of all of the scenes that are currently in the draft and the order that they are in. I didn't try to change anything. I think that's why I got so overwhelmed and failed completely the last time I tried to make an outline, because I started trying to order the scenes while I was making the outline, and that was just not effective. So this time what I did was I literally just wrote the scene order that I currently have them in my story, and then I went to my scene list from the last time that I made a scene list, you know, a year ago or whatever that was, and I just took the list that I came up with back then and I added it to my current list of scenes. So I made a list of the scenes that are currently in draft 2, and then I wrote at the bottom the list of scenes that I thought might potentially need to be included in draft 2. And that's kind of where we are. And I'm not sure what good this does me. I can sort of see like the main idea of how having a bird's eye view of your story via outline could be helpful, but I'm not yet at a point where I find that it is helpful. I've made a list of scenes. Now what? I don't know what to do. It's almost like I can see the crumbs of the story, but I can't like mush them all back together to make a cookie. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not sure how it helps me to have written out all of the scenes that I have currently included in the story, because it's not like I'm not getting any kind of revelation. The scenes aren't connected or in any kind of order, so making a list of them doesn't really help me see the story because there is no story. I don't know. I'm having a hard time figuring out what I'm supposed to be doing next, is the main gist of this, I think. Maybe walking on the treadmill will help. Like, if I watch some writing YouTube videos and get in the headspace, maybe I'll have some ideas. I sure hope so. Okay, I still haven't walked on the treadmill yet, but one of the things I did do was write down some of the subplots that I think should be in the story that are not yet present in my story at all, so they're not in my scene list. So, 2 of those are the arc of different fantasy creatures that are in this book. It's a fantasy, there are some fantasy creatures, and they're gonna be as part of the arc of the setting. I know I should be getting away from writing the arc of the setting, but I want the arc of these fantasy creatures to be in the story, and they're not yet present in the story. They're just in my head. So even though it's not really helping the plot, and it's only furthering the arc of the setting, I do want to think up and include the arc of these fantasy creatures in this draft somehow. So I wrote that in my outline. I didn't think of any scenes for their arc or even like what their arc will be. I just wrote that that's something I need to do. It's like a to-do list now, kind of on the side of my outline. I also wrote the main motivation for 3 of my main characters on the top of the outline as just kind of like something that I need to be keeping my mind on while I'm trying to create this outline and like craft a plot. Because right now the characters are kind of there in the story, but they don't have arcs and they don't have like driving goals, so there's nothing like pushing up against anything. So I think if part of what I do in this outline is try to craft, or even like try to find placement for scenes for how I could lay out each of these character arcs in the story, that could be helpful if that's something I'm able to do. So I haven't yet started trying to do that. All I did was I wrote down just 3 of the characters in the story. There are like other very important characters, but so far I wrote down 3 of them and what their primary motivations are in the story, to then hopefully be able to craft like individual plot, like subplots, and put that into the outline, like scenes for each subplot based around each character's main goal. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not even sure if it makes sense to me, but that is one of the things that I have done so far. Okay, now maybe perhaps I should walk on the treadmill. Okay, I still have not walked on the treadmill. I'm getting ready. But one of the things I want to do in this outline attempt is do some color coding, because that might help me. So I'm gonna have red be the scenes that don't yet exist. I have not written in draft 2, and that's mainly the entire 3rd act. But there are also some scenes connecting where I am in the story now and the 3rd act that I haven't even written in red yet, because I don't even know what those scenes should be. So like, those are going to be something I have to dream up originally fresh and new that I have not yet done. Because where I am in the story in draft 2 is not the immediate bridge to the 3rd act. So that's going to be having to be something coming in the future. That will be the red, and then I'm thinking, I'll use green for connective tissue that I need to add in between the scenes. It's either going to be like some sort of time passing and also like causal chain between the scenes that's going to be having to happen in the connective tissue. And again, that does not yet exist in draft 2, so it's not in the document, but hopefully when I think up moments of connective tissue and I add them to the outline, I'll write them in green. That's my plan. And then I think I'm going to use blue for these fantasy creature arcs that I want to add to the story, even though that's really just part of the arc of the setting. And I just want them to be in the story. They're not yet in the story. I've always wanted them to be, in the story. Like, it's always felt like part of the story, so I'm still gonna include them, even though it's just contributing to the arc of the setting and not really the plot or like the characters or the causal chain between events or anything. But it doesn't yet exist yet in the story, so I'm going to use blue to indicate scenes where I can put in these fantasy creatures and create an arc as part of the arc of the setting. That doesn't exist yet, but it's something I've always wanted in the story, so I'm going to put it in the outline, and I'm going to use blue to indicate fantasy creature arcs. And then I think I'm also going to use different colors for the different subplots that I have to weave in that don't yet exist yet in the story. And the subplots are going to be based around like the main motivational arcs of the main characters. Those are going to be color-coded yet. I haven't yet thought of what they're going to be, so I don't have color codes for them. But that is currently where the outline stands. Okay, so I did end up just now finish walking on the treadmill for 2 miles. It doesn't feel great. I mean, I feel like it should feel great, but it just doesn't. And I know it's because like I expect to walk my 2 miles and suddenly feel like, you know, healthy and energized. It's just a lot probably to ask of a 2-mile walk. But it's finished now for today. And I know like ultimately walking 2 miles every day will be healthier for me than not walking at all. But I'm not yet feeling the benefits. But it's finished for today. I also wanted to say something that I forgot to say earlier, which was when I was writing the list of the scenes in Draft 2 today, I realized that there are 39 scenes currently in Draft 2 that I put in my list. There were 2 moments of dialogue that I've not yet put in the list that I probably should, even though they weren't like scenes. One of them was like a clip of dialogue that was like about a page, and the other one was like almost 3 pages, but it was literally just like the characters talking, and it was kind of nice, like, you know, character development or like character insights into the secondary characters, because there's only one point of view character in this story. But they weren't a scene, you know, nothing was really being accomplished, and so I didn't know how to mark them as a scene in my scene list, so I just didn't, but I probably should at least like make note of them, because probably that dialogue could be incorporated in some kind of scene, you know, to keep that character development in the story. But that was just something. And then after the 39 scenes that are in Draft 2, I wrote 9 scenes that still need to be in the story. And these are going to be like 9 scenes that could be in the 3rd and final act of the story. The 39 scenes don't immediately bridge into those next scenes that don't yet exist. So like something has to be happening in the middle that I'm not quite sure of. But I'm also not quite sure those 9 scenes are precisely what the 3rd act needs. It's just kind of like, you know, my past self thinking this is potentially what needs to be in the 3rd act, or at least these 9 scenes. You know, it could end up being wildly different scenes if the 3rd act, you know, veers off in a wildly different direction based on what I do now in revisions of, you know, figuring out main plot points and like character arcs and primary relationships and, you know, all that jazz. But I just wanted to say today on my scene list I wrote 39 scenes that are in Draft 2, plus 2 conversations that aren't yet on my outline that probably should be, and then 9 scenes that I think should be in Draft 2 in the 3rd act that don't yet exist. That's just the update. Okay, so I just went in to try to find those 2 dialogue scenes in the novel, and just so I could make note of them in my outline. But while I was doing that, I remembered that there are a lot of comments in the margins of this draft from some from some past me who was trying to write the 2nd draft, and I also think I should make note of those comments in my outline, just to like, because a lot of the comments are like, you know, brainstorming different outcomes for the characters and like different motivations, and, like things that could happen to connect the scenes and stuff, so I feel like I should also try to make note of those comments in this outline, just to like keep all my thoughts together. So my outline's getting kind of messy because I'm just kind of making a list of like potential things that I could work on in Draft 2. Like a to-do list, but not like a succinct to-do list, like the part of the to-do list that was me saying like these are subplots that need to be in the book, but just like thoughts. And I'm not sure how I feel about it because it's really messing up my current outline.
Isn't that so funny? It's like it looks like the video is in reverse.
It just does
that is so weird.
It is the next day. last night I did end up going through my draft 2 document and like reading the notes that I had taken in the margins and kind of transferring those thoughts at least over into my outline document. And like I made note of where those 2 dialogue scenes were that weren't really scenes and were just dialogue. And I made note of those in the outline. And I also made note of like where in the story they could go, like what scenes they could be merged with to become like actual scenes and not just lines of dialogue. And then I started realizing like how it could be helpful to see this bird's eye view in terms of like adding layers to the story. I always edit in layers. That's why I always say like I do literally will do like 400 drafts because in each draft I only ever try to focus on one thing. So I'll have a pacing draft and a draft for each character arc and a description draft and just a million different drafts, scene order draft. All of my edits are done in layers, and by color coding an outline with the individual subplots that I want to add to the story as their own color and then putting them in the outline, I can see the layers that the story needs, which is helpful. At the moment, it doesn't feel like a 100% epiphany type of situation because last night I literally created a complete outline, like beginning to end. I thought of like 1.5, maybe one scene and a bit of connective tissue between where I am now in the story and the scenes that I think should be in the 3rd act. And I put those in the outline. So like as an outline, if you were thinking like, does this outline create an entire story? It does, but it doesn't feel like, I don't know yet, I'm not sure. It's like I'm looking at my outline and I see all these layers that I want to add to the story, sprinkled into the outline where they might go in the draft. And that is helpful. But my fear is that there's still something missing because perhaps part of that is because I just created this one scene and a bit of connective tissue to connect where I am in draft 2 with scenes that need to be written, which it was about 9 scenes. And then I fear the book will only end up being like 60,000 words, which is not what I want. And it's also like I recognize that that's also just not enough for the story that I actually want to tell. And so I fear that the subplot scenes that I have just perhaps thought up, played with the idea of sprinkling into the outline and like putting those color-coded pieces into the outline of like where those subplots could be. Maybe I'm not giving them enough meat yet in the outline. So like my fear is that taking this outline and like applying it one for one with the draft will still not produce a story that I'm trying to tell, because it's possible that while I was creating this outline and like weaving these subplot scenes into the color-coded outline, I didn't add enough meat to the scenes. Like I didn't add enough meat to the subplots. And so like each subplot maybe has like 3 to 5 scenes that I put in the outline. And like maybe they're each gonna end up needing like 7 to 9 or something. And I can't see that yet in the outline, because like when I'm just looking at the outline, I can see this is now a complete story. But like I might not know that the subplots that I created or like that I color coded and tried to input into the outline are actually still really bare bones. Does that make sense? So like this outline that I created is now a complete outline. Like I'm looking at a bird's eye view of this story. I took the subplots that I know I need to add to the story, color coded them, put them into the outline, and I'm looking at this color coded outline like this is what the story needs, and it looks true. But there's a part of my brain that says it's possible that just by like completing an outline, I'm not yet able to recognize that my subplots are still extremely bare bones. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I was feeling last night. Because like on the one hand, I can really see how helpful it is to be able to have this bird's eye view, and how helpful it is to see all the layers of my edits that are going to be needed in color coding. Because that color coding of my subplots that I put into the outline just like really links with my brain, because that's how I edit. I edit in layers. So like I can tackle each edit by tackling a color on the outline. I'm just afraid that I didn't add enough meat to those color codings, so that if I tackle it one for one, my story will still end up bare bones. I really hope that makes sense, but that's kind of where we're standing. So like I literally do have now a complete outline for the first time ever of my book, of any book that I've ever written. This is technically the 8th book that I have worked on, and prior to this I have finished 6 books. So this book and another book are not finished, but I've never had a complete outline, and I do now, and that's gotta be something. And like I can feel how it is something, because this bird's eye view, the ability to see the layers as colors, feels like it could be really helpful. I just don't yet trust that my layers are substantial enough. I have also realized that not only do I fear that the subplots that I have put into the outline are not meaty enough to, fully tell the story that I'm trying to tell, but I also think that the scenes, not only, the scenes that I created for the final third act, but like all of the scenes that I suggested putting into the story in this outline, I realized that those could be the wrong scenes. So like I'm looking at this outline and it is a complete story. But I'm just not yet 100% sure that is the story that I'm trying to tell in my head. And there's no way for me to tell that until I actually try writing the draft. So like I think what I'm trying to say here is obviously this is the first outline I've ever written, but I am not yet a writer that like I can write an outline and then the outline is practically my draft one and then I just one for one transcribe it into scene and like create a draft. That doesn't feel like what I have done because like the unexpected surprising nature of writing that I experience like in the scene in the prose is not going to happen until I'm actually like in the scenes trying to implement what I created in the outline. So like it could end up being that the flow of the outline, the subplots, the scene spots in the novel could all completely change depending on how the prose actually turns out, like how the writing experience actually is while I'm doing it, because things could veer off and I could realize everything needs to go in a wildly different direction and then my outline will be defunct and moot. Does that make sense? Another issue that I'm having with this outline is that I can't tell if by creating this outline and putting in those subplots and everything, if I have fixed any of the pacing problems whatsoever. Every time I go in to read draft 2, I'm always struck with how terrible the pacing is. Way too fast in some places, way too slow and meandering in others, just literally entirely wrong. And like a lot of that has to do with within scene pacing, and so just by looking at an outline of the scenes and like the progression of the scenes and like an overarching story progression, I cannot tell if that pacing has been fixed whatsoever. And I'm not gonna be able to tell until I actually start trying to implement this outline onto the draft. So that's something. But I'm not saying all of this to like bash outlines or to think it was a mistake to make this outline, because I'm actually feeling like it was the right thing to do to make this outline. But I'm not viewing it as I need to start making outlines for all books that I write. I think this is more like just solidifying the fact that I am a discovery writer and a lot of what I write happens in the scene on the page. Like a lot of that unexpected discovery that happens when you're writing, I need to be like in the weeds on the page in order for that to happen, and I can't really figure out how to make that happen in an outline, which is not a bad thing. I think the way I'm viewing this outline now is like a tool that I'm using to try to get me back on track with this story that I have been just so off track for like literally 2 years. Like I have gotten so far off track with this story, so lost and confused about what I'm supposed to be doing to make anything better or make sense or fix anything at all, that I'm using an outline as a tool to try to reorient myself, get back on track. And I think that is a very good use for an outline for me as a discovery writer. So I do feel good about making it. I just don't think that this means like automatically an outline is what I'm going to need for every story going forward. And I'm also not quite sure how to address all of these problems that I have with the outline in the outline, or even if I'll be able to at all. Like maybe the problems that I'm having with this outline, like whether or not it's fixing pacing, whether or not my subplots are meaty enough, whether or not the scenes that I've developed in the outline are actually the scenes that I'm going to want to put in the story. I don't know how to fix any of those problems in the outline, and I'm not even sure like if I should or if I could. Like it's possible the only way for me as a writer with my brain, as a discovery writer, the only way for me to actually fix those problems is in the meat of the draft. And like this outline is just a tool, but it's not like a savior. It's not like I can like put the story on an outline and like suddenly have all my problems be fixed. That would be nice, but I think in order for that to happen, I would need to be able to fix these issues that I'm having with the outline in the outline before going back to the story and risk getting, completely lost and meandering and confused about what I'm supposed to be doing in the story again, which could happen. We're not going to know until I get back into the story. So the next thing I'm going to do is begin trying to implement this outline in my draft. It's not going to be a one-for-one implementation, probably, because I won't know if what I've created in the outline is right for the story until I'm in the story. But that's going to be the next step. Also, I do offer fiction editing on Fiverr, anything from short stories or single chapters to whole novels. If anybody has a story out there that they'd like for me to look at, please check out the link in the description box below. Thank you. Please like and subscribe.